you. Thank you. Thank you for being here again. Nice to see you again. Do I need this? Yes. Right, it's better with the microphone on. Okay, so it's better, right? Yeah. Okay, so today we're going to talk about Russia and how ballet has evolved through Russia and in Russia. I call it, the title is From Russia with Love. In such a, in an ironic way. But the truth is that, as I was studying and getting the whole material ready for today, which is huge and enormous, and somehow it scares me because it's really humongous. It's very interesting how ballet went to Russia, became something else. It took more than a century for it to turn into something else. And then when it really became Russian, then they were able to bring it back to Western Europe. Russia, so let's go back a little bit in time. I like history and I'm all about history and development of this incredible form of art. Ballet was not meant for Russia. It just wasn't. What was meant for Western Europe was Peter the Great. Peter the Great, the emperor, was fascinated by France and by the way French nobles carried themselves and carried power. Back then in Russia, the elite, lived in wooden houses and slept in, benches. They lived in a very Spartan and espresso, bravo. Con lo zucchero, vero? C'è lo sugar, right, in it? C'è un po' di zucchero. Vedo. Va bene, thank you. So, no, aspettate che lo provo, magari c'è lo zucchero. Minchia amaro. Ok, forse lo zucchero aiuterà. Okay, so the way the elite carried itself and carried power was really Spartan and I don't want to say poor, but certainly was almost the way of warriors, almost. And Peter the Great wanted to really make a difference in the way the elite was. And so he saw and found very interesting the fact that ballet was vocabulary that expressed power. And that's why he brought it to Russia. For him, ballet was not a form of art at all, was a form of power. And he brought it back to Russia in a sort of a military way. So once he decided to bring these French and Italian ballet masters back to Russia and imposed the technique to all levels of nobility. He did it because he wanted to create a new vocabulary. Let's remember, we spoke about it, Louis XIV used ballet as a vocabulary for power. So, politicians had to audition by using ballet in a certain way, it was that important back then. So, the first few decades, ballet was just a way to teach noble people to carry themselves, to have a different type of posture, to live in a different sort of way, in a different way, and to show off their power. And that's when we have the difference comes really with Catherine the Great. I have to read the date because it's what I was reading, something that was very interesting for me to read, it was that in Western Europe, we had Reformation and Renaissance that made really the difference for us in development of the arts. Where in Russia, we have to say, they sort of got stuck with the Orthodox, religion, and that's why also the idea of ballet or of dance wasn't really accepted, where for us, if you think about it, ballet is really an expression of Renaissance, of the Vitruvian man in the center of the universe. I mean, it really expresses our vision of the world, not an Orthodox vision. And then Catherine the Great, and I'm terrible with dates. Catherine the Great loved the art of ballet. She loved it. And in 1766, I think, yes, she created the imperial dictatorate, meaning the directorate, which was the construction of 3 elements. One, zucchero, scusatemi, Grazie. So, 3 elements. One was Russian, a Russian troupe, ballet troupe. One was French, a French drama company. And one was a French, Franco-Italian, a French-Italian opera and ballet troupe that eventually became the Mariinsky, which is, up to now considered the oldest ballet company and ballet theater and theater and ballet company in the world. And Mariinsky was the link. Mariinsky was the bridge. Because when that was established, we start seeing French and Italian choreographers and composers going to St. Petersburg to choreograph and to create for the Russian Empire in a certain way. So we are at the end of the 1700s. Think about it. In French, they're already starting working on your point shoes. In Italy, Italian dancers are developing a strong technique. Beginning of the 1800s, Italian dancers are known for their virtuoso technique. And 1700, the end of 1700, because point shoes, the first ballet of point shoes is Sylphide, which is 1831, I think, and then the first dramatic ballet is Giselle, 1840. So at the end of 1700, with the French Revolution practically, after the French Revolution, after the years of terror, that's when they started developing the point shoes. The idea, new technology, and point shoes were part of the new technology. And we have all these incredible choreographers that go from France to Russia. So we have Jules Perrault, for example, Giselle, that worked in Russia for a long time. We have Petipa, who worked in Russia for 50 years. He actually I think he died in Russia. But somehow, this technique does not belong to the culture. As a matter of fact, little story, I studied Vaganova technique in Monaco, right? And which is very Russia, and Vaganova was the one that somehow melted more techniques in one, and the length of the lines and the legs, and the tempos were sort of transformed by Vaganova. But we had every week 4 hours of danze di carattere, character dances, which were Russian. And the movement of the arms and the feet and the tempos are completely different. That's their personality. Ballet did not back then yet represent a Russian personality. It did not. And I'm going to go into this because I know I can't go through, but The first ballet where we see merging of the two cultures is Bayadère by Petipa. Bayadère in 1800, I have the date somewhere for Bayadère, it's 1877. So Petipa followed Perrault, Jules Perrault, super famous, the choreographer of Giselle, with Coralie, another one that went to Russia. Jules Perrault was made the ballet master of the Imperial Theater, which then became the Mariinsky, and was extremely famous. Petipa was a younger dancer that had to escape several countries because he had many qualities and one little problem. He liked women a bit too much, maybe. So everywhere he went and everywhere he toured, somehow he managed to become the lover of some married woman. And the last one was in Paris. So he had an affair with a married woman. I don't remember who her husband was, but her husband clearly was not very happy. And he challenged him to, how do you call it, a fight, a sword fight, a duel. And the brother of Petipa clearly thought, well, this guy is a great dancer, but maybe he's not going to survive a duel, sent him to Russia. The guy had to escape the first time from the United States, the second time from Russia, from Spain, and the third time from Paris. And he went to Russia. And there he was a young dancer. He wasn't paid as much as the other foreign dancers. Anyway, he didn't have such a name, but he was under Perrault's wing, and who was extremely famous. Perrault was the most famous choreographer at that point in the world. And he started choreographing. The first choreography that he did was the Pharaoh's Daughter, super fun, 5 hours of ballet, and they still do it, by the way, in Russia. You can still see it at Mariinsky and Bolshoi. A shorter version. And then he did Bayadère. And in Bayadère, Petipa was able to mix a language where he put what were called the ballet fairy of France. Ballet fairy are all the ballet that have fairies inside. So Sylphide, Giselle, the Willis are fairies, horrible fairies, but are fairies. All these, extravagance of these creatures and ghosts and spirits and blah, 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 blah. Ballet fairy with the construction of the Russian vision. There is and I'm going to explain what I mean by that. The structure, the military structure that Russia was used to and admired and sort of enhanced. And in Bayadère, there is a very famous scene where Solor, who's a soldier, a warrior, is mourning the death of Bayadère, and he smokes opium, and he falls into this sort of dream where he sees Bayadère, the soul of Bayadère. And Bayadère is Indian dancer. That's the name of Indian dancers, of a certain type of Indian sacred female dancers. I'm sorry, to be complete, to say the whole thing. And so he smokes his opium, and he falls into the effects of the drug, and he sees Bayadère. But after Bayadère, there are other souls that enter. And these souls are 2, 5, 10, 20, 40. They're 64. And they enter, they do step, 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 arabesque, then back, and then step, 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 arabesque, and back, and they created this incredible line and shape of dancers, and it's mesmerizing. It's the first time where the language of European ballet meets the construction of Russian ideal, vision. And I want to show you a little bit. Unfortunately, it's a very long scene, so I can't show you the whole thing, but at least I can show you a little bit, because it's really beautiful. It's called The Kingdom of Shades. It's beautiful. It's also the name is fantastic. So let me see. So let me go to when Solor smokes a little bit. Here, I think he's almost smoking. Okay. This is Bayadère. Stop here. It's addictive. It's addictive to me when I see it. It's incredible. It's a vision, and I'm sure that if you've ever seen Bayadère at the Met, ABT, is just as striking. And it's an interesting thing because I was an extra in some of those Bayadère production, and when they have to do the Kingdom of the Shades, they closed everything backstage. Nobody can enter. There are only the ballerinas, because it's so, mind and physically consuming. I mean, they really have to keep the same steps, and they go down this platform round. And of course, the first one, the poor girl, the very first one does this thing like 200 times. The last one does it like 3 times. But the first one is incredible. Anyway, so this was the first time we see this connection between Europe and Russia. There is the European romanticism, but there is a Russian structure, and then something happens. Alexander III becomes emperor. And Alexander III is not so much for France and Western European culture. He feels that it's detrimental to the Russian culture, this whole European, maître, French, Italian technique. And he liked Petit Pas, but he felt that something was missing, especially in the music that up to that point was mainly European. And so Alexander III appointed as the head, I need to read the name because I never pronounce it right, but appointed as the head of the Mariinsky, Zelozovsky, sorry about my pronunciation, I apologize, who understood that what was missing was the relationship between a French choreographer and a Russian composer. And he thought of Tchaikovsky. He thought that the best way to put together the two sides was bringing in Tchaikovsky. And he really loved both Petit Pas and Tchaikovsky, so the relationship between the three was perfect. And there they did, at that point, the first ballet that we considered Russian, which is Sleeping Beauty. Sleeping Beauty is the first ballet that is considered Russian. Why? Because it has Russian music, but it also has stories and tales of Russian flavor. The technique is, I'm going to say square, meaning it's a strong technique, but at the same time has an energy and a stamina that is closer to the Russian type of dancing. When Russian dancers started coming to Europe, what we really saw in them was the energy, this way of being wild. If you think of, I'm going to show you something about Pavlova, but if you think of Nureyev, we all know Nureyev. If you think about Nureyev, the energy, even if his movements were not maybe very clean, the lines were not perfect, but the energy was incredible. So Sleeping Beauty is the first ballet that where we see. Let me see if I have something from Sleeping Beauty to show you. Where we have, yes. Let me see here. This is super fast. The thing here. Okay, I brought something. Where is it? Sleeping Beauty. Eccolo qua. Io solo. I want to show you something about Sleeping Beauty. Opala. Okay, so we're gonna freeze it for a second. I knew it. Yes, we're gonna freeze it for a second. We're gonna Did you see anything? Okay. Sorry.
So let's get into it.
Okay, perfect. So now 1 second. Sleeping Beauty has, the story is really a metaphor for France and for Louis XIV. So it's France that wakens up through Louis XIV, and the whole world is changed thanks to him. So it is a metaphor for Louis XIV, but at the same time, it's a metaphor for power anyway. And so Sleeping Beauty was perfect, was considered sort of a, low cultural level as a ballet. It took for it a few years to get sort of a grip culturally, but it had all the perfect characterizations to represent Russia, to represent the technique, to represent the grandeur of this country, and at the same time to bring new dancers. Yes, it was danced by an Italian dancer, I think Dell'Era, a ballerina, an Italian ballerina, but still, it's the first ballet that really represents Russia. And have you ever seen Sleeping Beauty? It's, there are only few pieces that are really important. This one, it's, I'm going to show you the Blue Bird, because technically Blue Bird is really strong. You see the man, the first time you see men with, with a strong variation, and you will see her very feminine and with very long movements. Let me just show you a little bit here, just to, okay, I think this is fine from here. Even here, for example, the fact that it covers, I'm going to stop here. I don't want to show the whole thing, but okay, let's stop here. So I just wanted to show you a little bit. But even in the construction of the pas de deux, even, here we see he covers her. The man starts having a larger role, which will peak with Nureyev and Baryshnikov. This whole movement starts here, right? So here we are at a cross point. At this point, it took Russia 150 years, because this is 1888, I think, right? Yeah, 1888, Sleeping Beauty. So Petit Pas was 70 when he created. Ciao, zia. Petit Pas was 70 when he was able to create this new technique. We see his vision fully, and we're ready now to have what we call a Russian technique. What is very interesting is that it will be a Russian to give United States technique. Because, again, I studied Vaganova, and it's extremely different from French school, extremely, especially in the arms and the legs, but the arms, they're very different. At that point, we're at a crossroad. The next big one will be Nutcracker. Of course, Nutcracker by Tchaikovsky. At this point, Petit Pas and Tchaikovsky are almost one item. And we see the real Russian ballet. I'm not going to show it right now, because I want to show you something later on about Nutcracker. So I'm going to move forward a little bit fast. The next thing is this interest, this Western European interest for Russian dancing, because at this point there is a buzz about these dancers that are different from European dancers, are stronger, in the legs, and they don't have the technical skills of the Italian dancers, meaning Italian dancers were think about that. A Russian male dancer was supposed to do 2 to 3 pirouettes, clean, but 2 to 3. An Italian male dancer would have to do 5 or 6. So in a certain way, Italian dancing was, according to the Russian eyes, a bit closer to circus than it was to ballet. And Petit Pas, for example, there is a famous story about Petit Pas banging his head. I don't know if he really did it, but banging his head in Italy, in Milan, while watching Excelsior by Mazzotti, because he found it so technically circus that he couldn't even stand it. So, but there was a buzz about these dancers and these Russian dancers, and that's when Diaghilev comes in the picture. Diaghilev created the Ballet Russe in 1909. And for 20 years, Ballet Russe dictated the style of ballet. It is still now considered the most influential dance company in history. Incredible. For those 20 years, he put together great artists of all types. So you had Nijinsky, you had Pavlova, you had all these great dancers, but you also had Picasso, you had Coco Chanel. They were like the Cirque du Soleil, because they were not. But there certainly was something about that company, and the idea also bringing in Nijinsky, and then the sister, but Nijinsky, who was sort of a strange, he had a weird shape. Nijinsky was 5'4", so he was very short. He had very, very, very thick thighs, a short tronco, these very strong arms because he lifted weight, sort of a smaller head. So he wasn't per se a dancer that one, already back then he didn't have the body of a great dancer, but he had something. He had more than a regular dancer. He had magic. There was something about his jump, of course, and also about his body. And bringing him in was really an amazing idea, an incredible idea. If you think about, there is this incredible video of Spectre de la Rose where they put together the pictures of him and just sort of seeing, I want to show you a little bit of Spectre de la Rose. They put together all the pictures of him. Have you ever seen Spectre de la Rose, where he practically dances the spirit of a rose? A woman smells this rose, she dances a little bit, then she falls asleep, and the spirit of the rose enters in the room and starts dancing. And he has a very famous costume made with roses, with rose petals, and that costume had to be sewn on him every night because it was so tight, and there is this little hat. It's mesmerizing. And the thing that was famous, that ballet was really famous, and in Europe, in Paris, of course, because Ballet Russe was founded in Paris, but it was brought to Paris. In Paris, they went wild because at the end, I want to show you, at the end of this ballet, Le Spectre, this spirit, jumps out of a window. And this window is this high from the floor, and Le Spectre is over there. He does pa, step, pam, grand jeté, and out. And from the audience, this little wall seemed higher, and on the other side of the window, there were people ready to catch him jumping. And that's when Nijinsky became famous worldwide as the greatest jumper of all time. We now think that he wasn't, that he jumped high, but not as they say, they said that he jumped like 1 meter high by just standing in 5th position jump. That was impossible. But it was more the visual effect. I wanted to show you, I found, they all sort of ruined the trick, unfortunately. I think that the only one that doesn't is Baryshnikov. Because Baryshnikov is a great jumper. Spectre de la Rose, eccolo qua, this one. Baryshnikov is a great jumper, for real. Eccolo qua. No, this is Nureyev. Sorry, I put so many, Spectre de la Rose, aspettate. So the Nureyev one also is good. Let's see, but Baryshnikov, I think it's a little better. I like it better. Spectre de la Rose, Manuel Legris. Manuel Legris is fantastic, by the way. He's an incredible, incredible dancer. I love him. Okay, we're going to have the little commercial.
Who are you? You look vaguely familiar.
Okay. So, Baryshnikov, a great dancer, one of the famous Russian dancers that defected Russia, and he did it in Canada. Nureyev did it in Paris. Makarova, I don't remember where she did it, but anyway, great jumper, great technique. We're going to talk about them. I want to show you just the very end. The way they recreated it is perfect, of course. So now she's sleeping somewhere. Let's see here. Okay. Okay, let's do when, okay, they're dancing together. Sorry. So, as you can see, unfortunately, with these directors, see? So, unfortunately, we see he's landing, but the audience doesn't. So we only see the trajectory up of the jump, and that's what makes it look incredible. And even when he enters, they always take these 5 steps, run, run, run. So they enter from that window. From that window. They enter always from up. They look like they're flying in. It's a fantastic ballet, I have to say. In Europe, they do it. Here in the US, you don't see it much. But Nijinsky became worldwide famous, of course. And, and the idea that Diaghilev had to bring all these composers from, Debussy, Prokofiev, Stravinsky. It was mesmerizing. And then Nijinsky and Stravinsky together created this ballet, which is Les Sacres du Printemps, the spring. I don't know, Les Sacres du Printemps, in English it's the Sacred Rite of Spring, thank you, the Sacred Rite of Spring, choreographed by Nijinsky. They say, so the music was syncopated, went against the normal rhythm. Nijinsky followed his own instinct about movement and about the vision. He choreographed it. Dancers sometimes would go on strike because they could not understand this type of new movement. At this point, we are at a moment where Russians really own the technique and ballet, and ballet is now Russian, and they can do whatever they want with it. And so, Le Sacre du Printemps was the first time where we see they recreated it. I have a little piece of it for you, where they recreated it. this dancer, now choreographer, followed an instinct that went against the mainstream, went against the technique, it was just a vision. And I really suggest you to watch it. If you put Sacre du Printemps Nijinsky, you're going to find the whole production that they put together in Paris at the original theater where he premiered in 1913. And the end of it, I brought you a little piece of it. The end is incredible. I teach at a university in Italy called Bocconi, and that Sacre du Printemps is part of the program because it's the first time when something happens. Nijinsky was, and Diaghilev too, a fan of Isadora Duncan, the American ballerina. And here we have two worlds collapsing, the Russian history and this very young culture, and American culture, and this American dancer who did not like technique, did not like point shoes, she didn't like anything but freedom. And there is this moment of collision that brings miracles and changes really the history. Let me show you a little bit of the end. We have time, right? A little bit of I should have I put it somewhere. Let's see. Spectre après-midi, Sacre du Printemps, le Sacre du Printemps. Eccolo qua. Okay. This is the ending. I'm just going to move where he's surrounded by this creature, this bear, this man, and they all dance around him. I'm just going to show you a few minutes from the end. Sorry. Every time I see that contraction, I mean with the hands, you cannot not see Martha Graham. It's incredible. I mean, and this is 1913 Martha Graham, still had to happen. So you no longer see ballet in a certain way, but this is it's really the highest peak of the ballet russe and these Russian dancers, right? From there, the street is open. Russian dancers are at this point the most, the most admired and sought after dancers in the world. And we have several. For example, Anna Pavlova, I'm sure you know the dessert, right, that was created for her in Paris, the Pavlova. Anna Pavlova, for example, I'm not going to show you all the videos that I had, but Anna Pavlova was frail, has a strong technique, but in a frail body, and was extremely skinny, and she looked sort of, her balance looked weak. And in a certain way, it's my opinion, I could be wrong, that she is the one that somehow gave the shape to the ballerinas that followed. Because if we looked at the other ballerinas, Carlotta Grisi, all these dancers, Miragni, all these big famous dancers, ballerinas, their body was, I can't say thick, but it was certainly a strong body. Because the technique, the way they were studying, and also because the legs could not go above 90 degrees, so it's a negative lever. If you have to hold a weight here, it's much heavier than holding it up here, right? So having a leg lifted only at 90 degrees all the time makes very big thighs, right? And so that's why the dancers up to the 50s had this sort of strong shape, because they were all negative levers. And then, but Pavlova, even though the technique was that one, because that was the time, but her body was frail, and there was something extremely dramatic and romantic about she was moving. You can see her Dying Swan. I showed last time the Dying Swan, so I'm not going to have you see another one. But if you see her, Dying Swan was created on her by Fokine because she looks so wobbly almost, that he created an idea of the movement, and then she was free to move. So an idea of the few phrases, but then she was free to move. So these arms, for example, that now are very much choreographed. If you see the videos from Anna Pavlova, which you can find, they're much freer and less choreographed, and she looks more wobbly on point. And her shape is that of modern ballerinas. Absolutely. Then we move on. We need to talk about two more things. We have Russian dancers that really shape the world, and one is Makarova, Natalia Makarova for sure, and the other one is Maya Plisetskaya. Makarova and Plisetskaya were very different. Makarova had an impeccable technique. She was perfect. She was sort of for me, my comparisons are always between Callas and Tebaldi. My artistic comparison. I love opera, and I see in Tebaldi perfection, and in Callas the storm of my soul. I mean, there's everything in Callas, and in Tebaldi there is this square technique that is mesmerizingly beautiful, but it's technical, it's pure, it's crystal clear, and you see, in Maya Plisetskaya, in Makarova, you see this technique that is just perfect, and this energy that is warm and perfect and crystal. And Maya Plisetskaya, you see the fire, and maybe technically she was wonderful, of course, but she doesn't need that perfection, because her greatness comes from a fire inside that just takes you away. I always show my students her rendition of Béjart Bolero. And I will show it here too, actually. I think that's the 5th conference. I show a piece where you see Maya Plisetskaya doing Bolero, and she becomes a goddess. But then I'm going to show you a little piece of Makarova dancing here, rehearsing a technical piece here that I think it's by Jerome Robbins, that is extremely technical, and she uses her technique to give the energy of the movement. And she's just fantastic. I would never be able to choose either one. You see the same difference, so I can show the whole thing, in my opinion, between Baryshnikov and Nureyev. They both defected Russia. I don't remember the time. One, I think, in the 60s, one in the 70s, you know. And Nureyev had, his lines were far from perfect. He didn't have a split, he didn't have great feet, his legs were not that high, right? But he had an energy that just took you away. So, you know, women would faint when they saw him, blah, blah, blah. When they saw him dancing, this whole thing, Baryshnikov is technically perfect. The perfection of a male dancer. We still study nowadays jumps that he created, just to tell you. I mean, he had a technique that went beyond. First of all, he was a gorgeous dancer, a gorgeous man, and he had, you know. So they spoke to do two different parts of the soul in a certain way. Let me show you a little bit of Makarova. Let's see, you see I had Diana here. So, her technique, I know maybe, you know, I mean, for me as a former dancer, as a choreographer, her technique strikes me, and it's my opinion that she's the first modern woman in dance, in my opinion, when I see her, and Maya Plisetskaya as well. They both are, but her beauty is very modern. The feet, the legs, the way she carries the movement, you know, over, beyond. There's something about her that is extremely modern. I look at her now, I never get tired of her, nor Maya Plisetskaya. But for example, if I look at Pavlova, with all respect, I see that time has moved on and has changed, of course. I admire the genius. But here, I'm still in awe with the modernity of the movement. I still, you know, it hasn't changed. I need to go into the gift that now Russia brought here to the United States. And I'm going to end with this, with Balanchine. I felt that, you know, Balanchine requires a conference just for him. I mean, there's nothing to do. Balanchine was a genius. He recreated a vocabulary. He created a vocabulary of ballet, but I couldn't put it in the geography, so I had to, you know, put it in this here, and I feel bad, but I didn't have another choice. So Balanchine arrived in Western Europe through Diaghilev. It was Diaghilev that brought him along. And then, along his story, he came to the United States, where he first founded the SAB, School of American Ballet, and then he founded and directed, for 35 years, New York City Ballet. The incredible thing about Balanchine that I see as a choreographer is that he did what Petipa did in Russia, meaning Balanchine understood the culture that surrounded him, the energy that surrounded him. In those times, still now, but back then, United States, New York especially, were, the modernity, the epitome of modernity. And he sensed that. And he created a technique that had a different type of rhythm in a certain way. I'm not going to be too technical, but in order for me to be able to show you the next video, I have to tell you something. In Russian technique, French technique, and Italian technique, the rhythm, the accent tends to be out. So if we do a movement, the accents are going to be out or up. So, and 1, 2, 3, they're always out. You jump 1, 2, and 3. You're always up or out. What does that do to the dancer? A Russian or French dancer, your technique usually looks very light and up and ethereal, right? Made of air. It's that typical thing. Balanchine wasn't afraid of the in. He wasn't afraid of creating new positions, new, conformations of groups, but also he wasn't afraid of rhythm and accents more than rhythm, I'm sorry. He wasn't afraid of accents. So Balanchine used also the accents that are in. So he would do, for me it's impossible, having studied Russian, but he would do 5, 6, 7, 8, he would do, 1, 2, 3. They're always in. They jump, not always, but they can be in. Or they jump and the accent is down and down. They go down. What does that do to the dancer? That the dancer looks more striking. It looks more wham. It looks faster. It looks more energetic. It looks more American, New Yorker. The sparkle of this society, the incredible modernity, the speed of this society. It is in his technique. Also, he did something else. He opened the hip a little bit. So his arabesque were longer and the attitude were longer so that the leg had the length of the hips more. So if you look, there is a very famous picture of Maria Kovrowski in Ruby, I think, and she's doing jewels, Ruby, and she's doing an attitude with the leg band, and she's not completely open, but she's in a perfect Balanchine attitude, and her leg, she has very long legs, but with that, she looks even longer. We have something called force croisée, crossing forces, for which in Russian, French, Italian technique, there's always a cross, so that the shoulder needs to be tied up with that foot and cannot be open, or so we look square somehow. So Balanchine did these two things among the other things, and the accent is to me something that is meant for you. Two different waltz of flowers, come si chiama? Schiaccianoci, Nutcracker. Da, 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 I'm in love with both. I think, in my opinion, Balanchine's Nutcracker is pure magic. Pure magic. I mean, even though I like, Petit Pas version, it's beautiful. But when you see Balanchine's version, it's a tough one, So let me see. The Judge Balanchine, Nutcracker. Okay, so let's do the Royal Ballet first. And it's exactly the same point. So you see. like a spirit. Why happened it? Okay. So now, let's move to the United States. Let's go to the George Balance. I'm going to show you the same amount of minutes.
You know,
Yeah, oh,
Annalie,
mamma mia, we always have
What's
this
that,
thing.
James?
I was just thinking the holidays can be challenging.
Eccolo qua. First of all, notice the tempo and the whole thing. Look at the slides. Okay, I'm gonna stop here. So you see the difference. They look like two complete. First of all, here we are in a different time where it's a different era, it's a different world. Here we really sense the modernity from the costumes, the accents. You see how they're all in and out, but it keeps on changing. There is a rhythm. You really hear modernity. I mean, it screams, cars and speed and fast. So I'm going to leave you with, as you know, as we always do, the premiere of a new work I did for the Italian Cultural Institute. But before that, Diaghilev used to say, astound me, astound me. That was the famous mantra that he kept saying, astound me. And I think that's what Russian technique, Russian dancing, Russian ballet is about, astounding the audience. And they did through recreating the vocabulary, bringing it here, changing it. They really astound the audience, and that's what I want to end this with. So the new choreography, of course, it was directed by Ruben Zaccaroni, cinematography by Eleonora Privitera, and let me show you, as always, I thank the Italian Cultural Institute for allowing me to do this. Dancers are Luciana Paris from American Ballet Theatre and Jonathan Lujan. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. So I'm going to see you. Next one is, no, I don't remember, January 13th. January 13th. I'm going to see you. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you. Thank you. Please. By the autobiography of whom? Ah, Makarova. Really? I haven't read it. I'm gonna read it then, because she's incredible.
It's a very interesting life.
Okay. Yes, yes, she really had. Okay, thank you so much. I'm gonna do some. Oh, fantastic! Thank you so much. Thank you. Wow, okay.
I'm just curious. What do you think about Alicia Alonso?
That she's not Russian. That's my first opinion. No, I'm joking. To me, she is, herself, she's in herself sort of a miracle. I mean, I don't know if you know, Alicia Alonso was almost fully blind. She only could see light. And at a very young age, I don't remember, but she was like in the 30s, even less maybe, even younger than that. She had completely lost her sight except for lights, and she kept on dancing, and all she did was following the light on stage and mimicking glances so that she would look at somebody pretending. And it's mesmerizing because her Giselle, for example, you believe in her Giselle, but if you know that she's almost blind, to me she really is sort of a miracle. I mean, and also resilience herself. Then, technically, I think that she was a very strong ballerina, technically. I think that her strength was the acting of the steps. She was a great actor of those steps. She gave a meaning to each one of them. And so the technique was important, but it wasn't the most important feature for her. She was really an actor. Mangiamo. Thank you.